Here's an understatement for you. Cybersecurity is really hard. It feels like there's millions of moving parts. How do you know if you've got all the bases covered? Well, the good news is the U.S. National Institute of Standards, also known as NIST, created a cybersecurity framework that will give you a general idea of whether you've done all the right things or not. This is something you can use to build your cybersecurity program with. And in the first version of this, it included categories like identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And in the 2.0 version, which is about to come out, they added another layer, the governance layer. So let's take a look. So the cybersecurity framework is really expansive. I'm not going to have time to cover the whole thing, but I'm going to hit just a few of the high points to give you a general idea of what it's about. Let's take a look at this first one, the governance layer that was recently added. In this one, it says we need to take a look at our organizational context, understand what's the mission of the organization, what are the goals, what is it we're trying to achieve. Then we take a look at risk. This is a big one also. You need to understand what is the organization's tolerance for risk or their appetite for risk. How much do you want to take on? How much are you going to be risk averse? Because that's going to affect a lot of other things. We need to figure out who is responsible for doing what. There are various roles that people will have in this organization. And then ultimately develop policies and procedures that will correspond to this. A lot of organizations start with developing policies, and I'm going to suggest they should start with the risk because understanding your risk will affect all of these other things. Now we've set the stage with the big picture of governance. Now let's identify what it is that we need to protect. What are we going to identify? We're going to identify assets that need to be protected. What are the assets that we're going to try to protect? Well, it's going to be things like data, it's going to be hardware, it's going to be software, it's going to be people. Think about that in terms of identities, not the actual individuals themselves. That's a different subject. But these are the things we have to take a look at. So when I need a capability that helps me identify what all of those things are and tracks those assets, in some cases to do dynamic discovery of data and classifying it so that I know where the sensitive stuff is. Then we also need to identify what some of the risks are. We call that risk analysis. And in a risk analysis, one of the things we'll take a look at is the idea of attack surface management and vulnerability analysis. These are a couple of things that we have to do. The attack surface, that's the whole area where the bad guy could potentially get to us. We need to make sure that we know what all of those open switches might be so that we can close them, and we need to find out where the vulnerabilities exist. Now, how do we protect these things? Well, remember our old friend, if you've seen some of my other videos where I talk about the CIA triad that deals with confidentiality, integrity, and availability. These are the hallmarks of what we're trying to do to protect things in a cybersecurity environment. I want to make sure that sensitive stuff is only available to the people that are supposed to have it, it's confidential, that it can't be tampered with, it has integrity, and that it's available to the people that need it. So that's our goal. Well, what kind of things can we put in place to do that? Well, we're going to use things like cryptography, because in encrypting information, we make it so that other people can't see it. If they're just happen to be on our network, then they won't be able to see the sensitive information. Or if it's in a database, that is data at rest, then it will not be easily seen. Other things we're going to add are identity and access management capabilities, like multi-factor authentication, so that I really know it's you when you go to log into the system. I'm going to use other things like passkeys that make the system even more secure than a password would. And then I'm going to also make sure that I have a good backup recovery system. In particular, on the protect side, we're going to talk about backup. The data at some point could be compromised. I need to make sure that I have a good backup. Now the cybersecurity framework says we need a category to deal with detection of threats, things where we tried to protect, but it might have failed. So I need a monitoring capability. And with that monitor, I need to be able to figure out if I have adverse events. So I need to be able to analyze those things. Now, what kind of tools would I need in place to do that kind of stuff? Well, one thing that would help is an endpoint detection and response capability that goes on my individual workstations and tells me if I've got malware or other types of bad behaviors. A network detection response capability that lets me know if anomalies are happening at the network layer. A threat intelligence feed that tells me what kinds of things are happening in the wide environment, maybe even outside of our own network. What kinds of threats should we be looking for? And the attack surface management capability that I mentioned previously, that's something that I'd like to also take into account because that's where the guys are trying to attack. Well, that's a whole bunch of tools, so what I really want is something called a security information and event management system that actually coordinates and takes information, telemetry from all of these different systems, correlates, aggregates, and allows me to do that level of analysis. We detected an adverse event with our security information and event management system, and now we need to go further and figure out what we need to do with this. We open an incident. We have a system that has cases, and we need a management system that tracks those so that I can assign a case to an individual person. I can gather all the information that relates to that case and pass it off to them, the indicators of compromise, the things that I've discovered while I was doing my own analysis of this. So I'm going to need to analyze this particular case. And then ultimately, I need a capability to do mitigation. So I want to be able to have something that allows me to know what I do once I have found that this is a problem and I know it's a problem. So we have these things called dynamic playbooks that help us do that. Dynamic playbooks lead you through the steps that you need to do resolution. All of these technologies together we refer to as security, orchestration, automation, and response, SOAR for short. Remember that backup I told you to take over here in the protect stage? Well, we're going to now need that because now I want to restore. If the outage I just had caused me to lose data, then I need to be able to get that data back. But just bringing it back may not be enough. I also need to verify that the data is in fact secure, that it hasn't been changed, that it maintains integrity, for instance. And then, depending on the type of outage it might have been, there may be some communications that have to happen. I may need to notify certain organizations within my company. I may also have to notify, if this was a data breach, the consumers who were affected by this. So look at what the regulatory compliance aspects of all of these things are that you're responsible for. And by the way, those would be covered here under the organizational context and should also be included in your policies. So now you see how you can bring all of these pieces together. As you can see, there's a lot that goes into building a cybersecurity program and getting it all right. The good news is the National Institute of Standards created a cybersecurity framework that you can use as the basis for your own security program. I can't cover all the things that go into that, but I've tried to hit some of the highlights here. The good news, again, if you use this, then you'll know if you've checked all the boxes. And if you haven't, well, the bad guys are going to let you know, and you're really not going to like the way they tell you. Thanks for watching. If you found this video interesting and would like to learn more about cybersecurity, please remember to hit like and subscribe to this channel.